Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Bigfoot Zone, ECBRO. This show is a collection of tales by individuals who have had personal sightings, encounters, and interactions with these elusive creatures. Stories from people of many ages and from many backgrounds. The events in these stories have taken place in several states. As a listener reviews these accounts, the integrity, details, and sincerity of each story will be evident. And if you need a little encouragement in confirming what you already believe, or perhaps what you experienced personally, this podcast is for you. So ladies and gentlemen, sit back and relax, and be sure to share this around and give our YouTube channel a like. Stay tuned.
Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Daniel Benoit. Tonight, we got a special guest with us, Mr. Webb Kline. And joining me tonight, my one and only beautiful co-host, Julie McQuaid. Everybody, welcome to tonight's podcast. I'm glad that you guys are here with us tonight. And for those who usually watch my podcast and know that I go live straight from out of the state of Virginia, well, I'm going live straight from out of the state of Pennsylvania. And our guest tonight is from out of the state of Pennsylvania himself, Mr. Webb Kline. Webb, how are you doing tonight?
Well, I'm pretty good. We're getting a little bit of that kind of reverse feedback issue with you. I'm having a hard time. Not sure what's happening there.
Okay, let me do a little something here. Let me, Julie, I don't know if this will help. Keep your end for the time being. Okay. Let me try something real quick. All right. I don't know if this is going to help any, but sometimes it does help. Can you hear me okay now? Webb?
You're here and there. You're broken up a little bit. We'll try it. It seemed better. But...
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and mute Julie for the time being. Sometimes the littlest things help. I know when I mute extra guests that's on the podcast, sometimes that helps. All right, it's not letting me mute. I'm trying to reconnect. Talk to him when I get back.
Oh, okay. So Webb, where about in Pennsylvania are you at?
I live in a little town called Orangeville. It's north of Bloomsburg, if you're familiar with that. We're about 3 miles north of Route 80, about 35 miles east of Williamsport, about 35 miles south of Wilkes-Barre.
Okay, all right. I'm down in Somerset. So how close is that to Somerset?
Okay. Well, that's a ways. You're out there in the southwestern part of the state. I'm northeastern.
Oh, okay.
PA.
Okay. Can't tell if he's back or not. Oh, okay. I think Daniel's gone again. He must be having some audio trouble.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, yeah, I can hear you great. Like you're coming through just fine for me.
Yeah, I can hear you fine. He just, he goes in and out. Now looks like he's spinning. He's not.
Yeah,
I see
he's
that
thinking.
little,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's probably me. Anytime I get around technology, things like this tend to happen.
Oh, I'm the same way. I totally understand. Nothing goes right with me technology-wise either. So are you originally from PA? Have you lived in PA all your life?
Yep. Been here. I've lived in Nashville, Tennessee for 1 year. Other than that, I've been here.
Oh, okay. All right. He said it's not letting him connect right now. So
So I carried the conversation with him for a while.
So it's just you and me for a minute, I guess.
Okay.
He's having a little trouble connecting, that's all. Now you were saying, how long have you been in PA?
I've been here all my life but 1 year.
Okay.
We lived in Tennessee for a year, but other than that, we've been within 7 or 8 miles of here most of my life.
Okay. What area of Tennessee were you in? I've lived in Tennessee.
Nashville.
Oh, okay. That's a nice area to be.
It is. It's not like it used to be. It's kind of shocking. Man, it's grown so fast, and I'm not much of a city guy. Although one of my closest up Bigfoot sighting was actually down there, believe it or not.
Oh, really?
The last place in the world I would have expected to see one, but
so it was close. It was close to Nashville.
That's the most recent one too. That was it. Yeah, it was really actually within the city limits. And
seriously,
it was, yeah. So I mean, it was out in the country. I was out for a hike one morning down along the Cumberland River. I was staying down there with my wife and my brother. He had a timeshare down there, and we went down for a week. And so I went for my morning walk, and didn't get too far away from the resort area, and this thing walked across the road in front of me, maybe at the most 100 miles or 100 yards away from me.
Oh my goodness.
And there was absolutely no mistaking whatsoever. I mean, it was, probably, I'd say between 7 and 8 feet tall. I mean, it was big, way bigger than a human, and broad, black fur, and it looked at me and kind of did that sideways look like the Patterson Gremlin thing.
Oh my goodness.
And walked down into toward the river. And
okay.
It's funny, I had no fear about it whatsoever. I was just curious, and it was like I always carry my phone in my hand to take photos when I hike, and I had just reached in my hip pocket to get it out, so I didn't have it engaged yet. And the thing walked across the road. And I mean, it only took like two, maybe 2.5 steps, and it was across the road. I mean, it was big, long strides. And,
oh, wow.
And I ran to try to get a better glimpse of it. And I got up there, and here it had crossed over right at a yard. There was a small home there, and of course, I didn't want to go in somebody's yard, and it's like, oh man,
right.
I got to get down here where I can look over the riverbank. It's got to be down here, but I didn't go down. And then this big dog came out. So apparently he didn't. That was later, but apparently he didn't get any scent of it. But I called back to my wife, and then we hooked up with them later, and I took them out to show it. And meanwhile, I called a friend of mine back home, who is he's an interesting character. I know he's a believer in Bigfoots, and I knew he's been everywhere. He knows everybody. And I called him and I said, Jim, I said, if anybody believes me and knows anybody that has any clue to this, you would. So he said, oh yeah, he says, I got to hook you up with Brendan. So he hooks me up with this guy. He was from New Zealand and he landed in Nashville. He does some kind of therapy, I guess, to some of the, I don't know, he works with the artists down there. And
okay.
He paddle boats up and down the Cumberland River all the time. Mm-hmm. And so he calls me and he says, oh yeah, he said, he says, I've seen him. He says they live in caves down there. And I'm like, oh, come on, this isn't real, And
that's amazing.
So he made plans to come over. Meanwhile, my brother and my wife come out. We looked, we went back in, we found a shelter, which I have pictures of. I mean, it was freshly broken. Limbs were probably, I don't know, maybe 3 inches diameter, but they were clearly broken off, put in almost like a teepee style with brush put around it. Found a few tracks. And then this Brendan came and he got up there and he was shocked. He says, I can't believe this. He says, I rented off this woman. I actually rented this house here, and so it's like, all right, this is just stacking up. So nobody's going to believe the story because there's too many coincidences that are involved here. But he calls his landlady and he has her on speakerphone. She said, oh yeah, that's the Loch 2 monster. And
so she knew of it.
And oh yeah, and I knew right away what the Loch 2 was about because my brother saw a bobcat down there when he was jogging the day before, and he said it's this park called Loch 2 Park on the Cumberland River. There's locks, you know what I mean, like river locks where they kind of dam the water, and so I don't know what the history was, but they called Loch number 2. They made a park there, so they called it Loch 2 Park, and these animals were in that area for years. This lady said she wasn't allowed to go in the woods across the house from them when she was a kid because the smaller ones would jump out of trees and kill the deer, and they were always afraid they were going to get hurt. The family actually has a video of it, although she didn't know where it was. I mean, I asked, I said, why are you even admitting this to me? She said, well, it says if somebody sees it, we won't lie to them about it. We just don't like to get it around. It's a tourist area and we don't deny that they're there. Oh yeah, that's the Loch 2 monster, and told us.
Oh, that's amazing.
So they've been around there for years, like almost within the confines of the city. So that was my most recent thing. We asked around, as we went to some stores and restaurants, and there were a couple other people we met that knew of them too. So it's, I guess to the locals, it's a well-known thing. They all called him the Loch 2 monster. But there's no question that it was a Bigfoot. I mean, it was by far the nearest sighting that I've ever seen. The only other time I saw an actual physical one was very early on, about I would say 1984, I think, was about the first one I saw. I saw that a long way. I was in the logging business for years, and so we can go on to that. If you have more questions, I'll shut up. If you don't shut me up, I just keep going.
Oh, no, go ahead. No, you're fine. I was going to ask you on the Loch 2 monster, did you get to see his face?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He was, I mean, it was very much like the Patterson.
Oh, okay.
Bigfoot. I mean, it was it appeared to be male from that distance, but it had that, kind of ape-like looking face. It was a dark, the skin part of his face was dark.
Okay.
Hair was long, disheveled. I would say that his fur or hair or whatever was probably 3 to 4 inches long, and just kind of had to look as he crossed the road like he'd laid there all night and woke up, which maybe that's what it was. I mean, maybe he was going down to wake himself up in the river. I don't know, but it was just crazy that this Brendan, I mean, he had seen evidence of him, had seen one at one time. He claimed that they live in, there's caves along the Cumberland. And and then this lady that was his landlady. I mean, think about this. What are the odds that's happening? That I mean, if you knew my buddy Jim, you would know that if anybody has seen anything, he's been there, done that. I mean, he's just one of these guys that's very, very open. He's hiked thousands of miles and, literally lived on a motorcycle for a couple of years and traveled the whole entire country. And so he's quite a character. But, he knew this Brendan guy from New Zealand, and he hooked me up with him, and he got me all set up with the history behind it and confirmed what I saw. And
That's awesome.
And my wife saw the prints.
Mm-hmm. So Webb, I've had some connection issues, so I missed a little bit of what got started here. But could you touch base on how long ago these sightings and these occurrences took place?
This took place October 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
It was just that's the most recent one.
Nice.
So that was pretty exciting. I mean, that was totally unexpected. Worth the price of admission to go to Nashville, even though I'm a musician and I couldn't stand what was going on downtown, and we didn't go there after the first night. But
wow. So I want to interrupt again, and now Julie's been talking to you, and she's hearing what you're sharing. I do want to ask Julie, are you familiar with these locations or the general area where Webb's talking about?
Well, this was a sighting that he had in Tennessee.
Oh, in Tennessee. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we haven't gotten to the Pennsylvania event, right?
Nope.
No.
Oh, okay, no problem. We'll get there. That's great. Okay. See, I'm just trying to fill in the blanks and touch base because, like I said, I missed the first 15 minutes here. So
yeah.
Well, she said that she lived in Tennessee for a while, and so we lived there for about a year or so. That's how the conversation started.
Yeah, that's how it started.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Very cool. Great. Well, I'll let you continue. I mean, I don't want to interrupt nothing that you guys were getting into. So.
Oh, no. Go ahead and ask him questions.
Okay. Well, let me fill in a blank. I kind of want to fill everybody in for those who are listening. Now, from previous conversations that we've had just on Messenger Webb, that if I'm not mistaken, you are a truck driver and you do travel quite a bit. Is that correct? I don't know if you heard me, Julie. You may want to.
Problem again. I don't know. You got some kind
Julie, did you hear what I asked him?
Yeah, about the truck driving.
Yeah, ask him how long he's been doing that.
Webb, how long have you been truck driving?
I don't drive truck anymore. I mean, I drove truck. Well, I mean, I've had trucks since the 1970s, I guess technically, but I started driving over the road in 1992, and then I started my latest company back 14 years ago when I moved back. Well, basically, I bought a company in Nashville and we lived down there, and then we moved back to Pennsylvania. So I've had that ever since. But I haven't driven for a long time. So, I sat here at the desk too long and decided I needed to do something. So I started hiking a lot, and I hike, 15 to 1,700 miles a year. And so I'm, I guess realistically, you don't think about it because in terms of reality, it's like, why do I keep seeing these things? But then when one day I sat there and I'm looking at my log and where I've walked and how long, and it's like, if anybody's going to see anything, I'm going to see it because I'm in the woods way more. And back in the day, I was a logger for 14 years, so I worked in the woods. So I worked in the woods. I hunted, hiked. I've been pretty much a woodsman most of my life, except for the period that I drove truck. And even then, saw a lot of things along the road. I didn't actually, that's not true. I mean, one of my Bigfoot experiences was one I had with my wife, Stacy, up in British Columbia. And I saw the only other time I actually physically saw one was when I was driving truck up in the Poconos. And,
wow.
You want to talk about that for a little bit?
Lake Harmony. What's that?
Yeah, yeah. You want to tell us a little bit about that? Because I've been learning a lot about British Columbia. Julie, you might have to translate because I don't think he hears me.
Okay. Hey, Webb, can you tell us more about your experience in British Columbia?
Oh, now I'm getting a little bit with you, Julie.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Say that again. I think he came through there in the end.
Can you tell us a little bit about the experience you were last describing in the Poconos?
Okay, so that was okay. It wasn't my first encounter, but it was my first sighting, and it was in February. There was about 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet of snow. There's a lot of snow on the ground, and my uncle had just started a logging job up there, and I came up with the log truck, got the first load of logs, and I missed my exit, and I had to turn around, and so I was on Interstate 80, and I'm driving back toward the next exit, and there's a big wide open gas line. There's a big cut through the woods there, and I looked out, and here's this thing bipedal. At first I thought it was a bear standing on its hind legs, except I realized this thing's like practically running across this opening. And I'm like, what in the world is this thing? And this is, back before, Bigfoot was big on TV. I mean, the only time I'd ever heard of Bigfoot, I'll never forget the day I got my National Geographic magazine that my aunt always gave me for Christmas every year. And I got this copy of it in 1967. And there was the Patterson-Gimlin patio on the front cover of it. And that was, the first time anybody had ever actually seen a photograph of one. So I guess there was a fascination there, but I never really thought about it. And when I saw this thing, I didn't even equate it with Bigfoot. It was just like, what on earth is this thing? It's some kind of a monster. And I'm going to be working out there, and I don't like this because it's heading in the direction where we're cutting timber. So that's all I could think. But by the time I got there, I was just so freaked out. I never said anything to my uncle because he's going to think I'm nuts. And I just suppressed it and kept it in the back of my mind all those years, and I never really thought about it. The first actual encounter I had was a couple years before that, and that was up near a town called Proctor, which is up north of Williamsport. I don't know, Rose Valley Lake up in that area. And we were cutting a piece of timber there, and we were way back. I mean, our haul road was about a mile back in, and we did what we did in the morning. We'd cut and skid in the morning, and we'd fill the landing up with logs, and then we'd eat lunch, and then I'd get my axe and my stick, and I'd measure logs out. Back in the day, that's, you did it all by hand. You didn't have machines doing all that. And so I would start cutting logs. Well, I would start making these notches for the logs that I'm going to cut out of the trees. Mm-hmm. So we'd know where to cut them at. And something started answering back. And, the skidder operator was with me, and we're like, what the heck is that? And I mean, the first thing that came to our mind was, it was sounded like somebody driving a wedge in a tree, except it was really close and it was really loud. And we were on a 600-acre tract. There wasn't anywhere near us. And, we were the only ones in there cutting. So we got up in the woods, and we walked around, and we didn't hear anything. We thought, oh, that was weird. And we came back, and I started notching for some newer logs with my axe, and we started hearing this whack again. And it wasn't an echo. I mean, it wasn't, sometimes I'd make 2 notches and it would make 1 or whatever, but it was distinctly something else making that knocking. Well, you're starting putting 2 and 2 together, and you're thinking, what can this be? No animal makes this kind of noise.
Right.
And so we got up on the skidder, and we drove the log skidder up through the woods, so we're up above the ground and couldn't see better. And we drove all over up in there, and we didn't see anything. And we came back, and I started cutting logs up and saw, and we started loading logs, and that's the last of it. I left it go, and I never wondered, if finding Bigfoot or something like that was on there back then. I would have put 2 to 2 together, and I would have thought, oh, maybe that's Bigfoot. But I'd never even dawned on me. And then I had that encounter up there in the Poconos, and it was the same thing. It's like, yeah, I saw something really big in the woods, and it was, I mean, that sighting, it was at least a half a mile away from me, but it was big, and it was making hay across that opening. I mean, it was running. I wouldn't say it was on a dead run, but it was walking fast, and it was doing it. And like I say, 1.5 to maybe 2 feet of snow. It was deep snow out there. So that was my Pocono experience. And then I had, well, I started, I guess it was it was before that. So I had another very similar encounter to that. Nope, that's right. I'm just trying to, this is over a span of 30 some years. So I'm trying to put the time.
Oh, okay.
The next encounter that I had was when my dad and I were cutting a tract of timber, and that was just over here across the river from Berwick, Pennsylvania, just a little bit east of Nescapec. There's some flats out there, and we had a really nice tract of big poplar and red oak and ash, and they're huge. There's north side timber, so it grows really tall. Beautiful timber in there. And so it's the same scenario. We were cutting and skidding in the morning, and we loaded the landing up with trees, and we ate lunch. Just kind of the ritual that we go through, the loggers go through, and because you got to get the landing cleared up at some point. So you use that, we cut it up, load some logs, and then if we have time, we'll cut and skid some more before the day's end. But I started making these notches, and something answered back again. And so my dad's like, "What the heck is that?" And I said, "This is something I've heard before." I said, we had the same experience up at Proctor when we were working up there. When I was notching trees, it was like something was mimicking us, and it was answering us back. And I said, "I have no idea what it is," but you could hear that it sounded like it was going up this really steep hollow. There's no other way in here. We were on the only haul road back along the mountain. And so we started walking up there, and boy, I mean, I just started feeling creeped out. I just was, I'm young yet, and I don't want my dad to think I'm a sissy. I'm not saying anything. And finally, all of a sudden, we just smelled the stench. I mean, it was just like, smelled like an open, like a game commission deer pit is what it was like. I mean, it was just like dead meat, just disgusting. And so I'm just like really getting freaked out now. And finally, Dad broke the silence. He says, "Did you ever get the feeling that you don't belong somewhere?" I said,
wow. Uh-huh.
And he says, "Yeah." He says, "Like now." He says, "The hair standing up on the back of my neck." I said, "Yeah, mine too." He says, "Let's get out of here." And so we turned around and we went back and go back to landing, started notching some more logs, and it starts answering me back again. And, eventually cut up and it went away. We had no idea what it was. And, maybe it wasn't a Bigfoot, and you have to ask yourself, and all the things that it could possibly be, there's nothing else. I mean, that I know of. I mean, I've spent my whole life in the woods, and I don't know anything else that could make that noise. And why would it do it when it's almost like it's seemingly answering back? And I had a third time after that, a similar thing. And we weren't logging, but my wife and I had gone out to British Columbia when I was driving trucks. She came logging with me, and we took the ferry over to Vancouver Island to get a load of paper. And so on the way back, there was just a beautiful place there where we could park and hike. And they had just done a selective cut, and took they left some seed trees in there, but they cut some huge old Sitka spruce that were probably 12 or 15 feet across the stump. And we climbed up on one of these stumps, and we got up there, and I heard these knocks again. We weren't making any knocks, but we heard these knocks. And I didn't want to say anything to her. She's really curious. She wants to get to the bottom of everything. And I didn't want to make a scene because I had no idea what was going on, but I was still freaked out over that deal over at Nescapec. And I didn't want to get her upset. And I didn't say anything about it because I didn't know. And here I am, 3,000 miles away from home. Maybe there is something else, maybe a grizzly does that or something. But I wanted to get out of there. And so I just made the excuse that we had to get back to catch the ferry before the DOT showed up to bother us. We just got in the truck and we took off and got on the ferry and crossed over. But those three encounters, even though they're what they would call Class B encounters today, were just, it wasn't really until Finding Bigfoot came out. And we were watching it one day, and my mom was still alive, and she was there watching it with us. And she started to tell this story about seeing a Bigfoot out west with two of her girlfriends when they went for a trip, and they got out of graduate from college. They went on this trip, and so she just totally believed in him. And she never said anything because, like me, she figured everybody thinks she was nuts. But now that it was on TV and people were talking about it, and that's when I just really got interested and thought, that really explains everything. It explains my sightings, my sighting in the Poconos. It explains these three things. And so that's, I guess that's pretty much my whole entire encounter. Although my brother had one that would have been, I'd say probably 3 or 4 years ago. That was up in the Poconos. He had left his daughter out there for a camp. They had an overnight camp there with friends, and she had an opportunity to go for it. They had to pay to go to it, and somebody called and canceled the last minute, so they took her up there. It was about 11:30 at night, and there's like a camping area. There's a mess hall and everything, and they took off from there. They no sooner left there, and this thing went across the road in front of them, and it just went across like a flash. And what really set him back was it was almost blonde, like lighter than deer or anything like that. Very, very light colored. And, he said it was almost like an apparition to him, except that it clearly went into the brush. And when it did, it busted all the limbs down and just carved a hole right through the side of the road there, like the brush wasn't even there. And he said to my sister-in-law, who has since passed away, but he didn't say anything for about 3 minutes while he let his brain process it. And he never knew what to believe of this stuff. I mean, he'd heard my stories, and he just, it's like nobody can really believe this stuff, until you see it. And he finally just belts out to her. He says, "I think I just saw a Bigfoot." And she says, "Oh, don't tell me you saw that thing too." And she was the same way. She was just shocked, and she didn't know what to do. And she processed it until, and then my brother mentioned it, and then they started processing. And yeah, they both saw exactly the same thing. And it was just, it's like it went by so fast that they said it was just almost like an apparition, except that it dove into the brush there, and you could see the limbs and everything flying just like a wood chipper when it went through there. So that's our family's history. I mean, there's been a lot. We lived right at the foot of Knob Mountain, which is the base of Jonestown Mountain. And that's a long mountain. We hiked it this spring. It's about 8 miles just to the halfway spot. So it's probably about 16 miles before it breaks, but then it connects with others. And a lot of that goes all the way up into Ricketts Glen State Park and Red Rock, what's known in the Red Rock area. There's a lot of mountains up there. There's a lot of history up in there. There's been a lot of Bigfoot sightings through that whole area. There's a lot of people believe that there's a family of them that have lived there for years. There's some other people. Some of the guys on the Pennsylvania Bigfoot have done some investigating up there, and they know these. There's been quite a few sightings. A lot of farmers in the area have seen them since as early as I know is 1980. So it's a pretty big, pretty active area. A few years ago, they were logging the mountain, and there were a lot of sightings like over toward Bendertown, and in those woods over there, and it's believed that they they just got spooked off the mountain when the loggers were in there, and so they went into some smaller wood lots to seek shelter. My daughter, who was actually running a place over there at the time, and had some kind of a weird encounter where something shook the woods and the birds flew out and it was shaking this tree really bad, and they couldn't define anything. But she called me right away. It's like, I think there's a Bigfoot here, and they were freaking out. But we don't really have any more definitive story other than that. But there are people in that area who had encounters during that time when the logging was taking place. And like I say, through the years, different farmers and loggers, there were some hunters up on the mountain that saw. Actually saw one. Supposedly, they were. No, I started feeding back.
Yeah, I'm hearing it too.
I'm okay now.
Now it seems okay.
Yeah. Okay. So there were some guys driving deer along the mountain, and one of them supposedly ran right up between the two of them, like running as faster than a deer. They were just absolutely shocked. And so I don't know a whole lot of story by that. I mean, it's one of the mountain stories, and it wasn't too long ago, but there's been a lot of sightings up there. So it's pretty
That's
active
amazing,
area.
though.
And I guess if you're going to spend a lot of time hiking around, you're going to run into crazy things. That mountain lion is the other that the game commission likes to say it doesn't exist, and yet there's literally hundreds of us that have seen mountain lions. So there are two things. I actually have a 38-second video of one that I took up here where I go hiking. So that's our cryptozoology of Columbia County, Pennsylvania, in a nutshell.
Yeah.
That's very awesome. But how long have you been living in the state of Pennsylvania?
I've lived in this vicinity almost my entire life. I mean, I was born in Bloomsburg. My family is from Orangeville, which is where I live now. I mean, we've lived in Bloomsburg for a while and then moved back here when we come back from Nashville. But pretty much our whole life, and we've worked, hunted, worked these woods, cut timber all over the place around here. I kind of wish that I could go back at some of these places and turn the clock back, and I would have probably found a lot more evidence, but I didn't even know I was looking for anything. I think that's the interesting part about my story, is that it's, I mean, I had like 4 encounters before I was ever even had the light bulb come on and said, oh, that must be a Bigfoot. I didn't know what to think. The woods is my domain. I work in there. You're safe as long as you're on a skidder or you got a chainsaw in your hand. But that you wouldn't be much to contend with if you had to deal with a 10-foot tall ape coming through the woods out here, throwing rocks at you. And so it's one of those things that you don't want to say anything about. You don't want anybody to know that you're afraid of them. And I guess that's an interesting thing too. There was never really a fear factor. The only time that I really felt freaked out was that the first time that I saw that thing, and I realized that I'm going to go in the woods and I don't know what this is. So I'm just going to pretend that it's not there, that it didn't exist. But I mean, I clearly saw it. There was no mistake. And it was, in the middle of the morning, it was bright out and snow. So there's no mistaking that it was a very tall black creature. But that vicinity of the Poconos, there have been a lot of Bigfoot sightings through the years. A lot of them, even some of them pretty recent.
Yeah. Now, as far as your experiences in Pennsylvania, have they been close to home, or what areas would you mind sharing that they have happened in?
Well, it's like I say, a lot of these, not my personal experience. The closest one that I had to the house was the one over by Nescopec, which is probably, 10 miles away from here. The way the crow flies, no more than 10 miles. That would have been the closest one. The one up at Proctor, that's probably 35, 40 miles away. The crow flies. The same with the one up in the Poconos, but in different directions. So, we're covering a pretty wide radius of area between those sightings.
So you may have kind of, roundabout way, you've already answered this question, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there to you anyway, because a lot of people I talk to that witness Bigfoot. What do you believe, in your honest opinion, what do you think Bigfoot is?
Well, I'm still in the terra firma variety. I believe that it's a creature that's probably the closest intelligence to a human being that there is. And it's just elusive enough that it's managed. It knows that it's big and it has to deal with that. And it just knows how to keep itself pretty elusive. And I often said I was tempted. There's somebody up here above Berwick that makes these great big Bigfoot statues. They're about 8 or 10 feet tall. And I said, I really felt like it'd be cool to buy one of them, put it up here in the pines and just have it sitting there with its head peeking around the tree. And I'll bet that we could have a party up here and nobody would even notice.
Yeah, those big statues. Those big statues are very cool. They're not cheap though.
No, I'm sure. I never stopped to see how much they were because I didn't want to be tempted. But in similar things, we were snowmobiling up in the Adirondacks and somebody put some cutout Bigfoot in the woods there, just for fun. And we went out through this place and never saw him there. And it wasn't until the way back, I think Stacy saw one and pointed it out, and I didn't see it on the way back. And there was, full lifelike cutouts, and never saw him back there in the woods. And it was actually a fairly open woods, and there was snow on the ground. So it just goes to show you, if you're not looking for them, they could be right there in your midst, and you never have any idea that they were even there.
Yeah.
And like me, maybe if I would have known, back then, if I'd have known about Bigfoot when I had the Class B sightings, maybe I'd have laid a eyeball on it. I didn't even know what I was looking for. We were actually, more than anything, thinking that, we were looking for some logger back there that didn't belong in there, that was in there cutting our timber or something. We had no idea what was going on. And it wasn't until that time a few years later when I was over there with my dad and we ran into that, the god awful stench. And then we knew that something really was weird. But we'd never heard anybody talk about the smell associated with them or anything like that. So at the time, I think that was about 1989, if I remember right, is when we saw that one. So it was a span. It's like I say, that first encounter I had was right around, I think it was right after my first son was born, which was in 1980. And then the next one was up in Poconos, would have been about 1984, possibly 85. And then the next one would have been around 89. And then Stacy and I saw that one up in British Columbia. That was around 98. It was before we were married, and we got married not long after that, but I'd say it was about 98 when we saw that. And then I didn't really have anything. I won't say I haven't had encounters. We did find something interesting when we walked Jonestown Mountain, Knob Mountain this spring. There were an area where trees were just clawed, and I understand that bears do that, but my buddy and I that was hiking with me, we couldn't, it was just like a wood chipper went after these things. Just massive claw marks, and they went up about 14 feet. And they just had the trees. The trees were dead, but they just had them clawed bare. And they're just like fresh chips laying all over the ground. And I've never seen a bear do that. It could have been a bear, but boy, I'm telling you what, if it was, you'd have thought it was a grizzly bear or something. Something really big that had a heck of a reach that made that. That was that. I just saw that this spring. We can't, we looked for footprints around and really couldn't see anything, but it really wasn't a good area. There was a lot of pine, on the ground, pine needles on the ground, things like that. It wasn't really a good area to look for prints. But, there's things like that. I mean, I've heard knocks different times in the woods, and, they weren't convincing enough for me to hang around there and try to figure it out anymore. But there's just something about it. Once you get that first glimpse, there's just like, you want to go back and you want to see this again. And I mean, especially since that one down in Nashville where it was that close to me, I just, it's like I said, I never even thought about fear. I just ran toward that thing because I wanted another glimpse of it. I wanted to get it on the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, I was not afraid. I mean, it looked at me. It clearly saw me as it walked. I mean, he turned his head sideways and saw me there, and couldn't have cared less if I was there. So I guess it didn't give me any reason to feel any fear. Maybe I should have, but I guess that's part of just being conditioned in the woods. You see a lot of things.
A lot of people, I hear a lot of people that have had very close encounters. A lot of them wish they'd never see one again. Then on the other hand, I've heard very few share what you just said, that, it's after seeing one, you have no problem seeing another one. In my honest opinion, and maybe it's the same for you, but it's a learning experience to witness them. Yeah.
It is. You want to learn everything you can about them.
Yes.
That's how I found you guys, because every time I see something on Facebook, I'm plugging into it again and looking for more evidence. It's just an amazing journey. But to the answer to that question about what are they, that's my opinion. I know others don't. My wife thinks that they're probably extraterrestrials or something like that. I mean, or maybe shapeshifters or something. She's not convinced that they're flesh and bone, but and maybe she's right. I don't know. I mean, my brother Herb, when he saw that one that he saw, they keep going back to that. It was almost like an apparition, and I don't know what keeps leading them back into that. But maybe there's something in there that indicates that they come in and out of reality. I don't know, but I like my feet in the ground, and I don't like to fly. I like to see, I think this thing probably has evolved here over time. And it's, I mean, they're all over. If it was an extraterrestrial, why would it be so hominid, like Neanderthal-like? It just doesn't it's hard for me to wrap my head around something coming from another galaxy that's as big and ugly and crude and doesn't take a bath.
Absolutely. As far as the way your wife sees things, there's a lot of people that stand on that same belief. However, there's a lot of us that kind of stand with you on your belief. But I'm somebody I have my belief too, and then I try, and it's easier said than done. I try to keep an open mind. Because there's all these different theories out there on what Bigfoot is or might be. What gets me is you have all these people saying Bigfoot's this and not that. Where do they get their facts? That's my question.
Right.
As far as beliefs, there's no wrong answer if you ask somebody what there is. Because, really, we don't know, but we can still believe, that's the way I look at it. So,
I pretty much agree. It's it is what it is. One day maybe we'll know. I hope I get to know that in my life, and if not, maybe God will show me when we're armchair quarterbacking everything in heaven. I don't know, but I certainly, it is just one of those mysteries of life that you just leaves you wanting to know more and try to connect with it. Maybe it's the human side of it that's the draw to people, that there is something about them that's just so human. I mean, seeing that one down there in Nashville was just like, it was just like seeing some massive 8-foot tall homeless guy or something. I mean, there was some kind of human connection there that, what's in these guys' head, and maybe they are. It's like, being a truck driver, you're around, you're around a lot of homeless in the city and things like that, and you talk to them and you'll help them out here and there, and some of those guys are just really highly intelligent people that just fell through the cracks or something, just went sideways there, and they find their peace that way, just living on the edge. But yet I've ran into guys that were very educated, and so who's to say that these creatures aren't that intelligent? And maybe that's why they can be that elusive. They seem to want to play games with it. I have a couple friends that saw one, and they said that thing had to have been close to 12 feet tall up in northern Ontario. They were fishing, and they left to come back to the camp, and they saw it in the rear view mirror, and it just came out and stood there in the middle of the road looking at them.
Wow.
And they were freaked out by it. And, so these things are living in the wilderness in the middle of nowhere, some of them, maybe 100 miles away from civilization. And they obviously big enough that they can fend for themselves. And maybe they just want to leave it that way. They just don't want anybody around. You hear a lot of those stories where they'll start throwing rocks at people and stuff like that. Maybe they just, they just want their space and want to be left alone. And
Right.
maybe we'll never know because they're smart enough to elude us. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've had a rock thrown at me, very large rock, some years ago. And that's the impression I got. They did not want me there. I was too close for comfort. I never got hit by it, but it landed right beside me. But yeah, I think that's a lot of their ways of saying, get out of here. They don't want you in the area. You're not wanted there. Because, again, they want to be left alone. And I absolutely believe that, But then again, you have some that are curious, that are drawn into our presence,
Mm-hmm.
So, Julie, what's your take on that, if you want to share anything on that?
I'm in agreement with pretty much what you all are saying.
So, interesting.
Yeah.
So, another thing, Webb, we're getting ready to come to a close here. A couple things I want to throw out there real quick before we do close, because I want to give you a chance to throw anything out there that you want to share to the public, and it could be anything regarding what you shared or your words or thoughts. But I do want to let everybody know, and because since we're talking about, you're a Pennsylvania resident, and we have other Pennsylvania residents that are watching and that will be listening to this in the future. One thing we want to promote is our Pennsylvania Myths and Legends Festival that's happening May 25th in 2024, right here in Somerset, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
That is taking place in Bakersville Community Grove at the park. As of right now, we have roughly 19 to 20 vendors, and it's looking great. We have a large response to this.
Mm-hmm.
It's a free event, so we encourage you and everybody to come on out, spread the word about that. And with that being said, Webb, I want to give you the last words on this podcast before we jump off of here. If you have anything you want to throw out there and share, and go, how about it?
Well, not much. I've pretty much covered all. I really appreciate you having me on here. I just, hopefully can give everybody a little bit to think about, to give them a few more clues, and never to give up looking. Although, sometimes I wonder, do they know if we're looking? You never really see one when you're looking for one, but I guess some people have. I know that I never go past a power line or a gas line in an opening in the woods in all these years without looking out to get that one last glimpse of one, so I think a lot of it is just keeping your eyes open. There's no doubt in my mind that they're there. And I just, if you're walking in the woods, always keep your camera ready on your phone. That's all I can say. Sooner or later, somebody's going to get that picture.
Yeah. Oh, I agree, man. And sometimes I try to tell people the same way, but that's easier said than done. I always have my camera on me. But you just never know. And, and a lot of people I know when they have that sighting or they encounter, you're just caught up in that moment. Sometimes the thought of pulling your camera out is not always going to be there. But hopefully somebody will. I mean, if you can keep a calm, steady, whatever, if you could relax and focus on what you're seeing and like, wait a minute, I better pull my camera out. Hopefully that happens. That would be awesome. So, but,
I know when it happened to me down there in Nashville. Trying to slow my echo down there. It was, I mean, I was literally grabbing for my phone before I saw this thing, just like I said, because I always carry it in my hand, and I had just left the resort and I pulled it out so saw it, even though it was literally there in my hand. I'm like, this is a real Bigfoot. There's no question what this is. And the last thing in my mind at that point was to take that photograph, as much as I wish that it was. I wish I could turn the clock back and say, quick, I got to get a picture. But when you see something like that, I mean, you want to see it in all its entirety. You don't want to look at it through your camera lens or anything else. You want to see this thing, and you're only going to have a flash because he's going to cross that road and he's going to be in the brush and down over the bank. And so that's why, when somebody finally does get a picture, they joke about him being blurry, but I mean, how many people are going to have one pose for him? It doesn't happen. In all my years of hiking and all the things that I've seen, is she talking, or you guys froze up?
No, you're good. I'm keeping myself muted so the feedback doesn't come up. Yeah.
When I took that picture of that cougar, I mean, I measured it out the next day. I was 94 yards away from it, and it was messing with a skunk in the middle of a field road. And I knew that I didn't want to get any closer to this thing because it scared the tar out of me. I mean, it's like, that thing would just tear me apart and nothing flat. But I had my camera out, and I was lucky because, I mean, there's a lot of big buck up there. I just, I take pictures of all kinds of wildlife, lots of turkeys, and I never know what I'm going to stumble into, especially because I started out at the crack of dawn, when early in the morning the game's out feeding. There's always a lot to see, but you never expect something like that. And that is a clear shot. I mean, if you blow it up, it's still a very good video. And so that's why I think, if you see one, don't worry about getting it right. Get the picture. The thing will blow up. I mean, the cameras you have down these days, the pixels are high enough on them that you can zoom the thing out once you take the picture, and you're still going to get a really good, clear photo of it. I mean, that's the way it was with that cat. I mean, everybody could see, like it was 20 yards away in the video. So I never worry about that. Just keep that camera ready and get the shot, get it quick, and try to keep that in your mind. They're there. There's the Poconos, Columbia County, Luzerne County, Lycoming County, Sullivan County, all those areas that, the people around here have seen a lot of Bigfoot, and we've been seeing them for the last 40 years. So over 40 years. So they're there. You just got to spend the time. The more people in the woods, better chance somebody's going to come up with one. So.
Absolutely. Webb, I can't thank you enough for agreeing to come on here. This has been great. We would like to have you on here in the future. One of the things I like to do here is I don't always interview people. Sometimes I like to have roundtable discussions with various people where the conversation is very open, where everybody shares their input or anything they want to share. So that's something to look forward to somewhere down the road. And I can't thank Julie enough for being on here and covering and being my co-host. I really appreciate her doing this for me.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you've been a great help, sweetheart. And but yeah, me and Julie, you actually will be getting together. We're going to be doing some investigations here. She's actually showed me around quite a bit here in the state of Pennsylvania, sorry. Where we've actually been doing some investigations and found some very interesting things along the way. But we will be going out tomorrow. We're going to be doing a night stakeout. We're going to get out there before the dark falls, and then sit, listen, and stay stationary and see what we can come up with. Our eyes and ears will be open. We'll have the gizmos. Yeah, we'll have gizmos and gadgets playing. So we'll see how things turn out. So yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yep.
But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to call it a night. I want to thank everybody for being on here and tuning in. For those who might have come on here later, that's okay. You can watch the podcast over again. This will also be available on the online ECBRO Bigfoot radio program, online radio, which will be heard all around the world. So again, everybody, thank you for keeping it real and joining us tonight. Till next time, keep it squatchy, my friends, and we'll be back. So, all right. And we're out.
Okay.